The doorbell rang at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in October. I knew it wasn't my parents. They'd already made it clear they never wanted to see me again. Through the peephole I saw three men in dark suits, and the one in front held up a badge that made my blood run cold. Secret Service. We need to speak with General Martinez immediately. The problem was, I wasn't a general. I was a 23-year-old college dropout living in my grandmother's basement, and just 6 months earlier, my own parents had tried to have me arrested. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Jessica Rivera, and I used to think the worst thing that could happen to someone was losing their job or failing a class. I had no idea how naive I was until the morning my father, Michael Rivera, looked me dead in the eye across our kitchen table in suburban Phoenix and told me he was calling the police to have me arrested. "You've crossed a line, Jessica," he said, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and disappointment that I'd never heard before. My mother, Carmen, stood behind him with her arms crossed, nodding in agreement. The woman who used to make me chocolate chip pancakes every Sunday morning was now staring at me like I was a stranger who had broken into her home. It all started 3 months earlier when I dropped out of Arizona State University. I was majoring in computer science, pulling decent grades, but something felt fundamentally wrong about the path I was on. Every morning I'd wake up with this crushing weight in my chest, like I was slowly suffocating under the expectations of a life that wasn't mine. My parents had mapped out my entire future: graduate with honors, get a job at Intel or Microsoft, marry a nice girl from a good family, buy a house in Scottsdale, and produce grandchildren for them to spoil. But I had other plans that involved the basement computer setup I'd been building since I was 16, and a project that I genuinely believed could change everything. The confrontation happened on a sweltering August morning. I'd been living at home for 2 weeks since leaving school, spending most of my time downstairs working on what I called Project Nightfall. My parents assumed I was playing video games or wasting time on social media. They had no idea I was developing something that would later catch the attention of people far more powerful than any of us could have imagined. "Jessica, get upstairs right now," my father's voice boomed down the stairs that morning. I saved my work and climbed up to find both my parents waiting in the living room, along with my Uncle Tony, a Phoenix police sergeant who'd always been my father's go-to person for tough love conversation. "Mija, your mother and I have been talking," my father began, adjusting his glasses the way he always did when he was about to deliver bad news. "This behavior has to stop. You're 23 years old, living in our basement, with no job, no education, and no prospects. We've enabled this long enough." I tried to explain about my project, about the breakthrough I was close to achieving, but my mother cut me off with a wave of her hand. "Enough with the computer nonsense, Jessica. Your Uncle Tony has connection. He can get you a position with the city maintenance department. It's honest work, and it'll give you structure." The maintenance department, after years of advanced programming courses, mathematics, and countless nights teaching myself systems architecture, they wanted me to clean sewers and fix traffic lights. I could feel something breaking inside my chest, like a guitar string snapping under too much tension. "I'm not doing that," I said quietly. "Yes, you are," my father replied, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used to use when I was 12 and had broken curfew. "Or you can find somewhere else to live." That's when I made the mistake that would fracture our family forever. I told them about Project Nightfall. "I'm working on something important down there," I said, standing up from the couch. "I've developed a new type of encryption algorithm that can't be broken by conventional methods. I've been in contact with some researchers who think it could revolutionize digital security." Uncle Tony snorted. "Digital security? Kid, the only security you need to worry about is job security." But my father's expression had changed. Instead of dismissive anger, I saw something else creeping into his eyes: suspicion. "What kind of encryption?" he asked slowly. I should have stopped there. I should have kept my mouth shut and walked away. Instead, I made the fatal error of trying to impress him with technical details I was certain he wouldn't understand. It's based on quantum-resistant lattice cryptography with a hybrid implementation that I've been testing on various government databases. I said proudly. Not hacking them, I added quickly, seeing his expression shift again. Just testing the theoretical vulnerability of their security systems, all completely legal and theoretical. The room went dead silent. Uncle Tony leaned forward. You said government database. Well, yeah, but I never actually accessed anything. I backpedaled, suddenly realizing how this might sound. I was just running theoretical penetration tests to see if my encryption methods were actually effective. It's like academic research. My father stood up slowly, and for the first time in my life I saw fear in his eyes when he looked at me. David, are you telling me you've been attempting to hack government computer systems? No, I'm telling you I've been developing security improvements that could help protect government computer systems, I said, but even as the words left my mouth I knew I'd lost them. Carmen Rivera, the woman who had taught me to tie my shoes and helped me with homework every night until I turned 18, looked at me like I was a terrorist. Michael, she whispered to my father, what if someone finds out? What if they think we knew? What if this reflects on your work? My father worked as a mid-level accountant for a defense contractor. Nothing top secret, nothing glamorous, but enough to require a basic security clearance. I watched the color drain from his face as he realized what my theoretical research could mean for his career. You need to stop this immediately, he said, but his voice had lost all its authority. Now he just sounded scared. I can't stop, I replied. And I meant it. I'm so close to a breakthrough. This could be worth millions. This could change our lives. It's going to ruin our lives, my mother said, tears starting to stream down her cheeks. Jessica, how could you be so selfish? How could you put our family at risk like this? That's when Uncle Tony stood up and pulled out his phone. I'm sorry, kid, he said, not meeting my eye. But what you're describing sounds like computer crimes to me, and given that it involves government systems, he shook his head. I have to report this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own family was going to turn me in for trying to make the world more secure. You can't be serious, I said, looking from face to face, hoping to find some trace of the people who had raised me, who had believed in me, who had told me I could accomplish anything if I worked hard enough. But those people were gone. In their place stood 3 strangers who saw me as a threat to their comfortable, predictable lives. My father cleared his throat. David, you have until tomorrow morning to delete everything on your computers and provide proof that you've ceased all this research. If you refuse, we'll have no choice but to involve the authorities. And you'll need to move out, my mother added quietly. We can't have this kind of activity happening under our roof. I stared at them for a long moment. These people who had created me, raised me, and were now ready to destroy me to protect themselves. Then I turned and walked downstairs to pack my things. By sunset, I was living in my grandmother Sophia's basement across town, and my parents had blocked my phone number. 3 days later, Uncle Tony called me directly. Kid, I need you to know I filed a report about our conversation, he said. I had to. But I also want you to know that I told them you seemed willing to cooperate and cease the activity. Thanks, I guess, I replied, though I wasn't sure if I was grateful or furious. The FBI might want to talk to you at some point, he continued. Just be honest with them. Oh, don't try to be clever. I hung up the phone and looked around my grandmother's basement, at the computer setup I'd managed to salvage and relocate. Project Nightfall was still there, still calling to me, still promising to be the key to everything I'd ever dreamed of accomplishing. I had no way of knowing that in less than 6 months, my theoretical research would put me at the center of a situation that would make my parents' betrayal seem like a minor family disagreement. And I definitely had no way of knowing that the same project they'd tried to have me arrested for would soon make me the most wanted woman in America. My grandmother Sophia had always been the black sheep of the Rivera family. While my father built his life around rules, regulations, and the safety of predictability, Sophia had spent her younger years as an investigative journalist, chasing stories that powerful people didn't want told. At 78, she still had the sharp eyes of someone who'd learned to spot lies from across a crowded room. Your parents are idiots, she said bluntly on my first night in her basement, setting down a plate of her famous carnitas tacos, always have been too scared of their own shadows to recognize brilliance when it's sitting at their dinner table. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Sophia's house in Tempe was a shrine to the stories she'd covered over the decades. The walls were lined with framed newspaper clippings, photographs of her with whistleblowers and activists, and filing cabinets that I suspected contained enough secrets to topple half the Arizona state government. Her basement had been converted into a workspace years ago, complete with multiple phone lines, a police scanner that never stopped crackling, and internet speeds that would make most tech companies jealous. "What exactly is this project you've been working on?" she asked, settling into an old leather chair that had seen better decades. For the first time since the disaster at my parents' house, I felt safe enough to explain Project Nightfall in detail. I told her about quantum-resistant encryption, about the theoretical vulnerabilities I'd discovered in current government security systems, and about the 3 researchers from MIT who had been quietly encouraging my work through encrypted email exchanges. Sophia listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or raising an eyebrow. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Jessica," she said finally, "do you have any idea what you've actually stumbled onto?" "A new form of encryption that could protect sensitive data from future quantum computers," I replied, confused by her tone. She shook her head. "You've stumbled onto the fact that our government's most sensitive systems are vulnerable right now, today, to anyone with the right knowledge and tools. And you've developed those tools." The implications hit me like ice water. I hadn't just created a theoretical security improvement. I'd created a skeleton key that could potentially unlock some of the most protected digital vaults in the country. "The researchers you've been talking to," Elena continued. "What do you know about them?" I pulled up the email exchanges on my laptop. Dr. Sarah Hoffman from MIT's Computer Science Department, Dr. James Wu from Stanford's Cybersecurity Initiative, and Professor Angela Rivera from Carnegie Mellon's Information Security Program, all legitimate academics with impressive credentials and published papers in major journals. Sophia studied the emails with the intensity of someone reading enemy intelligence. After 20 minutes, she looked up with an expression I couldn't quite read. "These aren't just academics, Jessica. Look at the metadata on these emails, the routing information, the timing of their responses. This is government recruitment." "What do you mean?" "I mean someone very high up in the intelligence community has been watching your work, and they've been using these professors to evaluate your capabilities and intentions." My blood went cold. "Are you saying I'm being investigated?" "I'm saying you're being courted. There's a difference. But not by much." Sophia disappeared upstairs and returned with a thick folder labeled Operation Minaret, in faded ink. "Ever hear of this?" she asked, dropping it on the desk beside my laptop. I shook my head. "An SA program from the 1960s and 70s. They monitored American citizens who they thought might be useful assets or potential threats. The program was officially discontinued, but," she gestured vaguely at the folder, "let's just say I've seen evidence that similar activities never really stopped. They just got more sophisticated." I opened the folder and found myself staring at surveillance photographs, telephone transcripts, and detailed psychological profiles of dozens of Americans. Scientists, journalists, activists, and computer programmers who had caught the government's attention for various reasons. "The pattern is always the same," Sophia explained. "First, they identify someone with useful skills. Then they test those skills through intermediaries. Academics, contractors, people who seem legitimate. Finally, they either recruit the person or neutralize them as a threat." "Neutralize?" "Sometimes that means offering them a job they can't refuse. Sometimes it means discrediting them professionally. And sometimes—" She didn't finish the sentence. I spent the next 3 days diving deeper into Project Nightfall while Sophia made phone calls to contacts she'd cultivated over decades of journalism. The picture that emerged was terrifying. My encryption algorithm wasn't just theoretically powerful, It was practically devastating to current security infrastructure. In the wrong hands, it could be used to access everything from nuclear facility control systems to the personal financial records of every American citizen. In the right hands, it could protect those same systems from foreign adversaries who were rapidly developing quantum computing capabilities. The Chinese are maybe 18 months away from quantum computers that could break current encryption. Sophia reported after a particularly long phone conversation with someone she referred to only as Baltimore. The Russians are probably 2 years behind that. Our people are scrambling to develop quantum-resistant security before those systems come online. So I accidentally solved a national security crisis. You accidentally created one, she corrected. Your algorithm proves that quantum-resistant encryption is possible, but it also demonstrates exactly how vulnerable everything currently is. That's when Dr. Sarah Hoffman sent me an email that changed everything. Jessica, your recent work has attracted significant attention from our research partners. We'd like to invite you to participate in a special symposium on advanced cryptography next month at a private facility in Virginia. All expenses paid, of course, and you'd have the opportunity to present your findings to some very influential people in the field. Sophia read the email over my shoulder and immediately went to her filing cabinets. Virginia, she muttered, pulling out a thick folder labeled Military Industrial Facilities. She flipped through dozens of pages before stopping at a satellite photograph of what looked like a corporate office park surrounded by unusually high security fencing. Reston, Virginia, she said. Home to about 15 different government contractors, 3 NSA satellite facilities, and the headquarters of something called the Institute for Advanced Digital Security. That's where they want you to go. Is that bad? It's not good or bad, it's just definitive. If you go to that symposium, you're officially in the game whether you want to be or not. Sophia spent the next week teaching me things they don't cover in computer science courses. How to recognize surveillance, how to communicate securely, how to identify the difference between genuine academic interest and intelligence recruitment. She also introduced me to her network of contacts, former journalists, retired government employees, and current whistleblowers who had learned to navigate the gray areas between patriotism and paranoia. One of them, a man she called Phoenix, who claimed to have worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency until 2019, was particularly interested in my story. The girl's in deep water, he told Sophia during a meeting at a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of Phoenix. I sat quietly in the booth, trying to process the fact that my life had somehow become the subject of clandestine meetings in places that looked like movie sets. How deep? Sophia asked. Deep enough that her parents probably saved her life by kicking her out. Phoenix replied. If she'd been arrested for computer crimes, it would have created a paper trail that certain people would have found very inconvenient. This way, she's free to make her own choices. What kind of choices? Phoenix looked directly at me for the first time that night. Listen, you've got maybe 2 weeks before this situation resolves itself one way or another. You can go to Virginia and become a government asset. You can disappear and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, or you can try to find a third option that nobody's thought of yet. What's the third option? That's what you need to figure out, he said, sliding out of the booth. But whatever you do, don't underestimate the people you're dealing with. They've been playing this game since before you were born. As I watched Phoenix disappear into the parking lot, I realized that my parents' betrayal had been the least of my problems. I wasn't just a college dropout living in her grandmother's basement anymore. I was a potential asset in a game I didn't understand, with rules I'd never learned, and stakes that could affect the security of the entire country. The invitation to Virginia sat on my desk like a loaded weapon, and I had 13 days to decide whether to pull the trigger. I decided to go to Virginia, but not for the reasons Dr. Hoffman expected. Sophia and I spent 3 sleepless nights developing what she called the journalist's approach, a strategy she'd used countless times when investigating powerful organizations that preferred to operate in shadows. Instead of walking into their symposium as Jessica Rivera, naive computer programmer, I would go as Jessica Rivera, independent researcher conducting her own investigation. The key, Sophia explained, while helping me prepare a hidden recording device, is to make them think they're recruiting you while you're actually gathering intelligence on them. But, Jessica, you need to understand something crucial. These people are professionals. One wrong move, one suspicious question, and you won't just be rejected, you'll become a liability. The recording device was smaller than a quarter, disguised as a shirt button, and capable of capturing audio for up to 12 hours. Sophia had acquired it from a contact she described only as someone who used to work for people who officially don't exist. If something goes wrong, she continued, handing me a prepaid cell phone with a single number programmed into it, you call that number and say exactly these words: "The Phoenix story needs immediate editorial review." Then you get to the nearest airport and take the first flight back to Arizona, regardless of destination. Understand? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I understood anything anymore. 3 months ago, my biggest worry was passing my operating system's midterm. Now I was preparing for what amounted to an espionage mission against my own government. The flight to Washington, D.C. was turbulent, which seemed appropriate. As we descended through gray October clouds toward Dulles Airport, I caught myself wondering if this would be the last time I traveled under my real name. Sophia's warnings about people who disappeared into the system had been keeping me awake at night. Dr. Hoffman met me at the airport personally, which I immediately recognized as unusual. In my limited experience with academic conferences, professors didn't typically provide personal taxi service to graduate students, let alone college dropouts. Jessica, I can't tell you how excited we are to finally meet you in person, she said as we walked toward the parking garage. Your theoretical work on lattice-based cryptography has generated enormous interest in our community. Dr. Sarah Hoffman was nothing like I'd expected. Instead of the stereotypical absent-minded professor, she looked like she could have stepped out of a corporate boardroom or a congressional hearing. Sharp suit, perfect makeup, and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of our surroundings. When she spoke about my work, she used terminology that was too precise, too specific for someone whose primary expertise was supposed to be in theoretical mathematics. Tell me, she said as we drove through Virginia's industrial corridors, have you given any thought to practical applications for your algorithm? Some, I replied carefully, remembering Elena's coaching. Though I'm more interested in the theoretical implications at this point. Of course, she nodded. Pure research has its own value. Though I imagine you've considered how your work might contribute to protecting sensitive information systems. There it was. The recruitment pitch, delivered so smoothly that someone less prepared might have missed it entirely. The Institute for Advanced Digital Security turned out to be a gleaming office complex that looked exactly like Elena's satellite photographs, complete with the suspiciously robust security infrastructure. As we passed through 3 separate checkpoint stations, I noticed that the guards were carrying weapons that definitely weren't standard for corporate security. Impressive facility, I commented. We take security seriously here, Dr. Hoffman replied with what I was beginning to recognize as her standard non-answer smile. Some of our research partners have very specific requirements about information protection. The symposium itself was unlike any academic conference I'd ever imagined. Instead of the usual mix of professors, graduate students, and industry representatives, the attendees looked like they'd been cast for a movie about secret government operations. Too fit, too alert, and too interested in conversations that stopped abruptly whenever someone new approached. My presentation was scheduled for 2:00 p.m. in something called the Secure Conference Room, which required an additional security clearance check and the surrender of all electronic devices. As I handed over my phone and laptop, I was grateful that Sophia had insisted on the hidden recording device. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Hoffman announced to an audience of about 20 people, I'd like you to meet Jessica Rivera, the independent researcher whose work on quantum-resistant encryption has been generating so much discussion. Independent researcher. Not a college dropout, not a computer hobbyist, not the girl whose parents had tried to have her arrested. Someone had been revising my biography. I delivered my presentation exactly as Sophia and I had rehearsed it, technically accurate but deliberately incomplete, demonstrating the power of my algorithm while withholding the specific implementation details that would make it immediately usable. The audience listened with the kind of focused attention that made the hair on my arms stand up. During the question period, I began to understand the true nature of what I'd stumbled into. Miss Rivera asked a man who'd introduced himself only as Dr. Williams from the Department of Advanced Research, "Have you tested your algorithm against currently deployed government security systems?" "Only in theoretical simulations," I replied, which was technically true but omitted the part about those simulations revealing catastrophic vulnerabilities. "And what did those simulations suggest?" pressed another attendee, a woman whose business card identified her as representing something called Patriot Digital Solutions. "That current encryption methods may not be sufficient to protect against future quantum computing threats," I answered carefully. The room went quiet. I could practically feel the weight of unspoken communications passing between the attendees. After my presentation, Dr. Hoffman invited me to a private dinner at a restaurant that was definitely not listed in any tourist guidebooks. The other diners were too well dressed, too quiet, and too obviously interested in conversations happening at other tables. "Jessica, I want to be direct with you," Dr. Hoffman said after our server disappeared with our orders. "Your work has attracted attention at the highest levels of government. People who are responsible for protecting our nation's most sensitive information system. That's concerning," I replied, trying to sound surprised. "It doesn't have to be. In fact, it could be the opportunity of a lifetime." She leaned forward slightly. "How would you feel about working with a team of the country's top cryptographers to implement your algorithm for practical security applications?" "What kind of applications?" "The kind that protects nuclear facilities from cyber attacks. The kind that keeps foreign adversaries from accessing military communications. The kind that ensures American citizens can trust their government to keep their personal information secure." It was a masterful pitch, appealing to patriotism, professional ambition, and personal security all at once. If I'd been the naive college dropout they thought I was, I probably would have signed whatever contract they put in front of me. "That sounds incredible," I said instead, "but I'd need to understand more about the organizational structure, the oversight mechanisms, and the long-term objectives." Dr. Hoffman's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. "Of course, we'll arrange for you to meet with some additional team members tomorrow. People who can answer those questions in much more detail." That night, in my hotel room, I used the secure communication protocol Sophia had taught me to contact Phoenix. His response came back within an hour. "They're moving faster than expected. The people you'll meet tomorrow aren't academics. Be extremely careful." I spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, knowing that tomorrow would determine whether David Chen disappeared forever into the machinery of government secrecy, or whether he found a way to maintain some control over the weapon he'd accidentally created. At 6:00 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Rivera?" "This is Agent Thompson from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to meet with you immediately regarding a matter of national security." The Virginia Gambit had just become something much more dangerous. Agent Thompson looked nothing like the FBI agents you see in movies. No black suit, no intimidating sunglasses, no theatrical displays of authority. Instead, he appeared to be a tired man in his mid-40s, wearing a wrinkled brown jacket and nursing what was clearly not his first cup of coffee. Of the day, we met at a Denny's off Interstate 49-5, a location so aggressively ordinary that it had to be intentional. "Miss Rivera, I want you to know that you're not in any legal trouble at this time," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "But you are in considerable danger, and I'm not sure you fully understand why." I had arrived at the restaurant 40 minutes early, using counter-surveillance techniques Sophia had drilled into me, and I was reasonably certain I hadn't been followed. Agent Thompson's presence suggested that either I was wrong about that, or the situation had escalated beyond anything Sophia and I had anticipated. "What kind of danger?" I asked. Agent Thompson pulled out a manila folder and opened it on the table between us. The first document was a photograph of me leaving the Institute for Advanced Digital Security the previous afternoon. The second was a transcript of a phone conversation I'd had with Elena from my hotel room, despite the fact that I'd used the encrypted communication protocol she'd taught me. "The people you met with yesterday aren't who they claim to be," he said quietly. "Dr. Sarah Hoffman hasn't worked for MIT in 3 years. Her current employer is a private intelligence contractor called Meridian Strategic Solutions, which specializes in what they call technical asset acquisition for foreign clients." The coffee I'd been drinking suddenly tasted like acid. Foreign clients? The Chinese Ministry of State Security has been actively recruiting American cryptographers for the past 18 months. Agent Thompson continued, flipping to another document. "Their quantum computing program is more advanced than most people realize, and they're desperately seeking ways to protect their own systems while maintaining the ability to compromise ours." I stared at the photographs and transcripts, trying to process what he was telling me. The patriotic recruitment pitch, the appeals to protect American security interests, the promises of working with the country's top cryptographers. It had all been a lie designed to deliver my encryption algorithm to China. "How long have you known about this?" I asked. "We've been tracking Meridian's activities for 8 months. Your name first appeared in our investigation 6 weeks ago, when our signals intelligence detected unusual interest in your work from servers traced back to Beijing." Agent Thompson pulled out another photograph, this one showing me at the Phoenix airport with Dr. Hoffman. "We were hoping to intercept their recruitment attempt, but they moved faster than we expected. By the time we identified their specific interest in you, you were already on a plane to Virginia. So you've been watching me this whole time, watching you, protecting you, and trying to figure out how to approach you without compromising an ongoing counterintelligence operation." He closed the folder. "The truth is, Ms. Rivera, your encryption algorithm represents a significant advancement in cryptographic security. In the right hands, it could protect critical American infrastructure for decades. In the wrong hands, it could be used to lock us out of our own system." I thought about Sophia's warnings, about Phoenix's cryptic advice, about the 13 days I'd had to make a decision. It seemed I'd been making the wrong decision all along. "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends on you," Agent Thompson replied. "We can offer you protective custody while we complete our investigation of Meridian Strategic Solutions. Or we can work together to turn this situation to our advantage." "What does that mean?" Agent Thompson signaled the waitress for more coffee, buying himself time to consider his words carefully. "It means we let Meridian think they've successfully recruited you. You continue working with them, sharing enough information to maintain their trust, while providing us with intelligence about their operations and objectives." The waitress refilled our cups and disappeared. Agent Thompson waited until she was completely out of earshot before continuing. "I won't lie to you, Miss Rivera. What I'm proposing is dangerous. These people have eliminated assets who became liabilities in the past, but you have something they desperately need, which gives you leverage. And we have resources that can keep you alive while you provide that leverage." I thought about my parents who had kicked me out to protect themselves from the consequences of my work. I thought about Elena who had risked her own safety to teach me how to navigate this world of secrets and lies. And I thought about the algorithm I'd created in their basement, the tool that had somehow made me valuable enough for multiple governments to fight over. "If I agree to this," I said slowly, "what guarantees do I have that the FBI won't just use me the same way Meridian is trying to?" Agent Thompson smiled for the first time since we'd met. "Honestly, none. But here's the difference. We're not asking you to betray your country. We're asking you to help us protect it." He pulled out a secure phone, not unlike the one Elena had given me. "This connects directly to my team. If you find yourself in immediate danger, if the situation changes in any way you weren't expecting, or if you simply decide you want out, you call that number and we extract you within 6 hours." I held the phone, feeling its weight. It was heavier than my regular cell phone, and somehow that seemed symbolic of the choice I was being asked to make. "There's something else you need to know," Agent Thompson continued. "Your Uncle Tony, the Phoenix police officer who filed the initial report about your activities, he's been feeding information about your family to Meridian Strategic Solutions for the past month." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't enough that my parents had abandoned me, My uncle had been actively selling information about me to foreign intelligence operatives. How much does he know about my current situation? Enough to put your grandmother in danger if Meridian decides you've become a liability. Agent Thompson said grimly, "We have Sophia under protective surveillance, but that won't last indefinitely." The decision crystallized in that moment. It wasn't just about my own safety anymore, or about the algorithm, or even about national security in the abstract. It was about protecting the one person who had risked everything to help me navigate this impossible situation. "What do you need me to do?" Agent Thompson slid another phone across the table, this one identical to my original device. "First, you're going to call Dr. Hoffman and tell her you're very excited about the opportunities you discussed yesterday. You're going to accept their offer to work with their team, and you're going to begin sharing limited technical specifications for your encryption algorithm." Limited. How? "We'll provide you with modified versions of your code, functional enough to demonstrate the algorithm's capabilities, but with subtle flaws that will prevent successful implementation. Meridian's technical team will spend months trying to debug problems that we've deliberately introduced." I thought about the months of work I'd put into Project Nightfall, about the breakthrough moments, and the late nights, and the pride I'd felt when the first successful tests had proven my theories correct. Now, I was being asked to weaponize that work in ways I'd never imagined. And while they're trying to debug the flawed code, we'll be mapping their entire network, identifying their other assets, and gathering evidence for what will probably be the largest counterintelligence prosecution in the past decade. Agent Thompson stood up from the booth. "Ms. Rivera, I want you to understand something. What you've created isn't just an encryption algorithm. It's a key that could unlock or lock down the digital infrastructure of entire nations. The question isn't whether governments are going to fight over it. The question is which government is going to control it." As I watched Agent Thompson walk away, leaving me alone with 2 phones and a decision that would reshape my life, I realized that my transformation was complete. I wasn't Jessica Rivera, college dropout, anymore. I wasn't even Jessica Rivera, an independent researcher. I was Jessica Rivera, double agent. And in 3 hours I had to convince Chinese intelligence operatives that I was eager to betray my own country. The secure computing facility at Meridian Strategic Solutions was located 4 floors underground, accessible only through a series of biometric scanners that recorded everything from fingerprints to retinal patterns. As Dr. Webb guided me through the security checkpoints, I could feel the USB device in my pocket like a burning coal against my leg. "Impressive setup," I commented, trying to sound casual while memorizing the layout for Agent Thompson's debrief. "We take data security very seriously here," Dr. Webb replied, placing his palm on the final scanner. "Especially when we're working with technology that could revolutionize digital protection for our international partners." The computing center was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Rows of high-end servers hummed quietly in climate-controlled chambers, connected by fiber optic cables thick enough to carry the entire internet traffic of a small country. Multiple workstations were arranged around the central server core, each equipped with quantum-resistant processors that probably cost more than most people's houses. "This is where we'll be implementing your algorithm for full-scale testing," Dr. Webb explained, leading me to a workstation labeled Secure Developmention Authorized Personnel Only. The computer system was already logged in under my name, which meant they'd been preparing for this moment since yesterday's meeting. "Before we begin," Dr. Webb continued, "I need you to understand that everything that happens in this room is classified under the highest levels of international security protocols. The work we're doing here will protect critical infrastructure for multiple allied nations." Allied nations? The euphemism was so transparent it would have been funny if I wasn't terrified. Dr. Webb handed me a thick folder containing technical specifications I'd never seen before. "These are the target systems we'll be testing your algorithm against. I think you'll find them interesting." I opened the folder and felt my stomach drop. The first document was a detailed schematic of the computer networks controlling the electrical grid for the northeastern United States. The second was a map of fiber optic cables connecting major financial institutions in New York City. The third was something that made my hands shake: architectural diagrams for the computer systems at the Pentagon. You want me to test my encryption algorithm against American infrastructure? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. We want you to test whether American infrastructure can be protected against future quantum computing attacks. Dr. Webb corrected smoothly. Your algorithm represents the cutting edge of defensive cryptography. By testing it against current systems, we can identify vulnerabilities before hostile actors exploit them. It was a masterful reframing. Instead of helping foreign adversaries attack American systems, I was supposedly helping protect them. Except that any encryption algorithm powerful enough to protect those systems would also be powerful enough to lock authorized users out of them entirely. That makes sense, I said, settling into the workstation chair. Where should we start? For the next 2 hours, I worked on implementing the FBI's modified algorithm, while Dr. Webb monitored my progress from an adjacent terminal. The flawed code performed exactly as Agent Thompson's team had predicted, demonstrating impressive capabilities while containing subtle errors that would prevent successful deployment. Fascinating, Dr. Webb murmured as we ran the first round of tests. The processing efficiency is remarkable. Much faster than our previous quantum-resistant implementations. Thank you, I replied, copying files to the system while watching for an opportunity to deploy the USB device. I've been optimizing the mathematical functions for months. The opportunity came during a scheduled break when Dr. Webb left to retrieve additional test specifications. I had perhaps 3 minutes alone with the most secure computer system I'd ever accessed. My hands were shaking as I inserted the USB device. The data intersector activated immediately, its hidden software beginning to copy files from Team Part 6. The secure computing facility at Meridian Strategic Solutions was located 4 floors underground, accessible only through a series of biometric scanners that recorded everything from fingerprints to retinal patterns. As Dr. Webb guided me through the security checkpoints, I could feel the USB device in my pocket like a burning coal against my leg. Impressive setup, I commented, trying to sound casual while memorizing the layout for Agent Thompson's debrief. We take data security very seriously here, Dr. Webb replied, placing his palm on the final scanner. Especially when we're working with technology that could revolutionize digital protection for our international partners. The computing center was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Rows of high-end servers hummed quietly in climate-controlled chambers, connected by fiber optic cables, thick enough to carry the entire internet traffic of a small country. Multiple workstations were arranged around the central server core, each equipped with quantum-resistant processors that probably cost more than most people's houses. This is where we'll be implementing your algorithm for full-scale testing, Dr. Webb explained, leading me to a workstation labeled Secure Developmention Authorized Personnel Only. The computer system was already logged in under my name, which meant they'd been preparing for this moment since yesterday's meeting. Before we begin, Dr. Webb continued, I need you to understand that everything that happens in this room is classified under the highest levels of international security protocols. The work we're doing here will protect critical infrastructure for multiple allied nations. Allied nations. The euphemism was so transparent it would have been funny if I wasn't terrified. Dr. Webb handed me a thick folder containing technical specifications I'd never seen before. These are the target systems we'll be testing your algorithm against. I think you'll find them interesting. I opened the folder and felt my stomach drop. The first document was a detailed schematic of the computer networks controlling the electrical grid for the northeastern United States. The second was a map of fiber optic cables connecting major financial institutions in New York City. The third was something that made my hands shake. Architectural diagrams for the computer systems at the Pentagon. You want me to test my encryption algorithm against American infrastructure? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. We want you to test whether American infrastructure can be protected against future quantum computing attacks. Dr. Webb corrected smoothly. Your algorithm represents the cutting edge of defensive cryptography. By testing it against current systems, we can identify vulnerabilities before hostile actors exploit them. It was a masterful reframing. Instead of helping foreign adversaries attack American systems, I was supposedly helping protect them. except that any encryption algorithm powerful enough to protect those systems would also be powerful enough to lock authorized users out of them entirely. That makes sense, I said, settling into the workstation chair. Where should we start? For the next 2 hours, I worked on implementing the FBI's modified algorithm while Dr. Webb monitored my progress from an adjacent terminal. The flawed code performed exactly as Agent Thompson's team had predicted, demonstrating impressive capabilities while containing subtle errors that would prevent successful deployment. Fascinating, Dr. Webb murmured as we ran the first round of tests. The processing efficiency is remarkable, much faster than our previous quantum-resistant implementations. Thank you, I replied, copying files to the system while watching for an opportunity to deploy the USB device. I've been optimizing the mathematical functions for months. The opportunity came during a scheduled break when Dr. Webb left to retrieve additional test specifications. I had perhaps 3 minutes alone with the most secure computer system I'd ever accessed. My hands were shaking as I inserted the USB device. The data interceptor activated immediately, its hidden software beginning to copy files from the system's encrypted storage drives. According to Agent Thompson's briefing, the device would gather intelligence about Meridian's other operations, their communications with Chinese handlers, and most importantly, the identities of other American assets they'd recruited. The copying process was supposed to take 90 seconds. After 60 seconds, I could hear footsteps in the corridor outside. After 75 seconds, Dr. Webb's voice was clearly approaching the computing center. After 80 seconds, I was sweating through my shirt despite the room's frigid air conditioning. The device finished copying at 87 seconds. I yanked it out of the USB port and shoved it back into my pocket, just as Dr. Webb returned with a stack of new documents. Sorry for the delay, he said, apparently oblivious to what had just happened. Our security protocols require additional authorization for accessing certain target specifications. The new documents were even more disturbing than the first set. Detailed maps of communication networks linking American military bases, architectural plans for the computer systems controlling air traffic control centers, and most chilling of all, technical specifications for the networks managing America's nuclear early warning systems. Dr. Webb, I said slowly, these systems, if someone wanted to attack them rather than protect them, my algorithm would provide exactly the tools needed to do that. An unfortunate reality, he replied with what appeared to be genuine regret. Any defensive technology can be repurposed for offensive applications. That's why it's so important that responsible parties develop these capabilities before irresponsible ones do. Responsible parties. I was beginning to understand that Meridian Strategic Solutions had developed an entire vocabulary for describing treason in patriotic terms. We spent the remainder of the afternoon running increasingly sophisticated tests, each one demonstrating how my encryption algorithm could be used to either protect or compromise critical American infrastructure. By the time our session ended, I had provided Meridian with enough technical information to begin developing their own implementation of quantum-resistant cryptography. Excellent work today, Jessica, Dr. Webb said as we prepared to leave the computing center. I think you'll be very pleased with the opportunities this partnership will create. I'm looking forward to continuing our collaboration, I replied, trying to sound enthusiastic while my mind raced through everything I'd learned and stolen during the past 6 hours. That evening, I met Agent Thompson at yet another anonymous location, a 24-hour laundromat in Alexandria, where we could talk quietly while pretending to wait for washing cycles. Did you get it? He asked, immediately. I handed him the USB device, feeling like I was transferring a weapon of mass destruction. Everything they showed me suggests they're planning to attack American infrastructure, not protect it. Agent Thompson plugged the device into a secure laptop and began reviewing its contents. His expression grew darker with each file he opened. Jesus Christ, he muttered after several minutes. Jessica, you've just provided us with evidence of the largest foreign intelligence operation on American soil since the Cold War. The data revealed that Meridian Strategic Solutions was coordinating with at least 15 other front companies, had recruited more than 50 American technology workers as unwitting assets, and was systematically mapping vulnerabilities in everything from power grids to banking networks. There's more, Agent Thompson continued, scrolling through communications logs. They're not just gathering intelligence for the Chinese government, they're selling access to multiple foreign adversaries: Russians, Iranians, North Koreans. Anyone willing to pay for the ability to compromise American digital infrastructure. I stared at the laptop screen, watching as Agent Thompson uncovered layer after layer of organized treachery. "What happens now?" "Now, we have a choice," he replied grimly. "We can arrest everyone involved with Meridian immediately, which would shut down their current operations, but allow their international handlers to disappear. Or we can keep you in place long enough to gather evidence about their overseas connections." "How much longer?" Agent Thompson closed the laptop and looked at me directly. "They want you to travel to Beijing next week for what they're calling advanced collaboration sessions with their primary research partners." Beijing, the heart of Chinese intelligence operations, thousands of miles from any possible FBI protection, surrounded by people who would eliminate me the moment I became inconvenient. "If I go to Beijing," I said slowly, "what are my chances of coming back alive?" "Honestly, maybe 30%, Agent Thompson replied. "But if you don't go, we lose our only opportunity to identify and neutralize a network that could cripple American infrastructure during any future conflict." I thought about my parents, who had kicked me out rather than risk their comfortable lives. I thought about Uncle Tony, who had sold information about our family to foreign spies. I thought about Sophia, who was hiding in a safe house because she'd tried to help me navigate this impossible situation. And I thought about the algorithm I'd created in Sophia's basement, the tool that had somehow made me valuable enough for multiple governments to fight over, and dangerous enough that staying alive required choosing between betraying my country or risking my life to protect it. "When do I leave for Beijing?" I asked. Agent Thompson handed me a new passport with my real name, but a completely fabricated travel history. "Monday morning. And Jessica, once you board that plane, you'll be completely on your own until we can extract you." As I walked back to my hotel with a fake passport in one pocket and instructions for surviving Chinese interrogation in the other, I realized that Jessica Rivera, college dropout, had traveled much further from home than the distance between Phoenix and Virginia. She'd traveled into a world where survival required becoming someone she'd never imagined she could be. Beijing in November was a city wrapped in smog and secrets. As my plane descended through layers of pollution thick enough to block out the sun, I wondered if I was looking at my own grave from 30,000 feet. The fake passport Agent Thompson had given me felt like tissue paper in my jacket pocket, flimsy protection against what was waiting for me on the ground. Dr. Hoffman met me at Beijing Capital International Airport, accompanied by two men she introduced as research coordinators, who looked like they could break me in half without breaking a sweat. The drive through Beijing's endless maze of highways and construction sites gave me time to review everything Agent Thompson's team had drilled into me during 3 sleepless nights of preparation. "The facility where you'll be working is quite impressive," Dr. Hoffman said, as we navigated through traffic that made Phoenix rush hour look peaceful. "Our Beijing partners have invested heavily in quantum computing research infrastructure." The research facility turned out to be a gleaming complex in Zhongguancun, Beijing's technology district, surrounded by the kind of security measures usually reserved for military installations. As we passed through checkpoint after checkpoint, I realized that getting out of this place would be exponentially harder than getting in. Dr. Zhang Wei, the lead researcher for what they called the International Cryptography Collaboration Project, was waiting in a conference room that overlooked the Beijing skyline. Unlike the Americans who had been pretending to recruit me, Dr. Zhang made no effort to disguise the true nature of our relationship. "Miss Rivera, your algorithm represents exactly the breakthrough our security infrastructure requires," he said without preamble. "We understand that you've been working with our American colleagues to refine the implementation, but now we need to discuss practical deployment scenarios." For the next 4 hours, I found myself in the most surreal meeting of my life. Chinese intelligence officers, speaking through translators, walked me through detailed plans for using my encryption algorithm to lock American government agencies out of their own computer systems. They weren't even pretending that this was defensive research. They were planning offensive cyber warfare operations using technology I'd created. The beauty of your approach, Dr. Zhang explained, is that it can be deployed gradually across target networks without detection. By the time American security teams realize their systems have been compromised, we'll have complete control over everything from power grids to military communications. I nodded and asked technical questions, while secretly recording everything through a device Agent Thompson's team had surgically implanted under my skin. The technology was so advanced it was essentially undetectable, but if they discovered it, I would disappear into a Chinese prison system that officially didn't hold American citizens. On my second day in Beijing, something changed. Dr. Zhang's assistants began asking increasingly personal questions about my background, my motivations, and my long-term plans. During lunch, one of them casually mentioned that they'd been unable to verify certain details about my academic history. "It's curious," he said over plates of Peking duck that I was too nervous to eat. "According to our research, you never actually completed your degree at Arizona State University." My blood turned to ice water. Agent Thompson's team had created extensive documentation for my cover story, but apparently Chinese intelligence had resources for verification that went beyond anything we'd anticipated. "I took a leave of absence to focus on independent research," I replied carefully. The university bureaucracy was slowing down my progress. "Of course," he smiled. "Though it's also curious that your parents filed a police report expressing concern about your computer activities just weeks before you began corresponding with our American colleagues. They knew, somehow, despite all of Agent Thompson's preparation, despite the FBI's counterintelligence protocols, despite the elaborate fiction we'd constructed around my recruitment, Chinese intelligence had uncovered the truth about my background." That night, alone in my hotel room, I used the emergency communication protocol Agent Thompson had taught me. The response came back within an hour. "Abort mission immediately, extraction team en route." But 12 hours later, no extraction team had arrived. Instead, Dr. Zhang appeared at my hotel with news that made my worst fears seem optimistic. "Ms. Rivera, we've had a very interesting conversation with your Uncle Tony in Phoenix," he said, settling into a chair across from my bed like we were old friends discussing weekend plans. "It seems there are some significant discrepancies between the story you've been telling us and the story he's been telling our American colleagues." Uncle Tony, the family member who had betrayed me to Chinese intelligence, was now betraying me to Chinese intelligence again, but this time with information that could get me killed. "What did he tell you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would be devastating. "He told us that the FBI approached you 6 weeks ago in Virginia. He told us that you've been providing our American colleagues with deliberately flawed technical specifications. And most importantly, he told us that you've been gathering intelligence about our operations for the United States government." Dr. Zhang stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Beijing skyline with the satisfaction of someone who had just solved a complex puzzle. "The question now, Ms. Rivera, is what we do with this information." I had perhaps 30 seconds to make a decision that would determine whether I lived or died. Agent Thompson's training kicked in, and I realized that my only chance was to do something completely unexpected. "Dr. Zhang," I said, "Uncle Tony is telling you the truth, but he's not telling you the whole truth." Dr. Zhang turned around, clearly surprised by my admission. "I was contacted by the FBI," I continued, "but not for the reasons you think. They weren't trying to recruit me to spy on you. They were trying to prevent me from giving you the real algorithm." I pulled out my laptop and began typing commands I'd never expected to use. "The encryption specifications I've been sharing with Meridian Strategic Solutions are flawed, but not in the way the FBI intended. The flaws aren't bugs, they're backdoor." Dr. Zhang's expression shifted from satisfaction to confusion to alarm as I explained the truth that I'd only just realized myself. "The FBI didn't want to stop you from getting my algorithm," I said, pulling up code that I'd never shown to anyone. They wanted to make sure that when you got it, it would give them access to your systems instead of protecting them. For the next hour, I walked Dr. Zhang through the real Project Nightfall. Not the version I'd shown to Meridian, not the version I'd shared with the FBI, but the actual breakthrough I'd achieved in Sophia's basement. An encryption algorithm so powerful that it could indeed protect systems from quantum computing attacks, but with a hidden feature that allowed the original programmer to maintain access regardless of who deployed it. "You're telling me," Dr. Zhang said slowly, "that you've been playing both sides?" "I'm telling you that I've been playing every side," I replied. The Chinese wanted my algorithm to attack American systems. The Americans wanted to use me to spy on Chinese operations. But nobody asked what I wanted. "And what do you want, Miss Rivera?" I closed my laptop and looked directly at him. "I want to go home. I want my grandmother to be safe. And I want to be left alone to continue my research without governments trying to turn me into a weapon." Dr. Zhang was quiet for a long time, weighing options that would determine both of our futures. "There is a possibility," he said finally, "that we could arrange for your safe return to the United States. But it would require certain accommodations." "What kind of accommodations?" "You would need to provide us with the complete, unmodified version of your encryption algorithm, and you would need to agree to continue your research under our guidance, sharing future developments with our technical teams." It was still recruitment, but it was recruitment with the promise of survival. And after everything I'd learned about the FBI's willingness to risk my life for intelligence gathering, Chinese recruitment was starting to seem less like betrayal and more like pragmatism. "I need guarantees," I said. "Not just for my safety, but for my grandmother's safety. And I need assurance that my future research will be used for protection, not attacks." "Those arrangements can be made," Dr. Zhang replied. 3 weeks later, I was back in Phoenix, living in Sophia's basement, working on encryption algorithms that I shared with research teams whose true identities I never asked about. My parents still wouldn't speak to me. Uncle Tony had disappeared into witness protection after his double agent activities were exposed, and Agent Thompson had been reassigned to cases that didn't involve assets who had become liabilities. The doorbell that rang at 3:47 a.m. on that Tuesday morning in October belonged to men who weren't Secret Service agents looking for General Martinez. They were Chinese intelligence officers who had arrived to discuss the next phase of my research. But by that time, Jessica Rivera, college dropout, had evolved into someone much more dangerous than any of them had anticipated. Sophia was right about one thing. I had stumbled onto something much bigger than a new encryption algorithm. I'd stumbled onto the realization that in a world where governments fight over technology, the only way to survive is to make yourself more valuable than the secrets you carry. My parents had tried to send me to prison to protect themselves. The FBI had tried to send me to Beijing to protect their investigation. The Chinese had tried to turn me into an asset to protect their operation. But in the end, I'd learned to protect myself by becoming someone none of them could afford to lose. And none of them could afford to trust. The girl who had once thought her biggest problem was failing a computer science midterm had become a woman who knew that sometimes the only way to win is to make sure that everyone else loses just a little bit more. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.